Cool. All right, welcome to the Be the Bison podcast. I didn't even know what podcast we're on. Kind of irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Got some cold weather here. I think today was I always use the word balmy and people laugh at me, but a balmy negative 27 degrees at the cabin this morning when I woke up with no wind. And I've got two of my favorite bison people. The bison industry is incredible. I have yet to meet anybody that rubs me the wrong way, and I'm brand new at this. I'm brand new. I've barely just put my foot in the door in the bison industry. But I've got two folks on here that have a lot of experience. One you guys probably already know if you listen to the podcast, Chad Kremer, who is on here. Chad is the herd manager of the Custer State Park Bison Herd, which you guys are going to get tired of hearing me talk about how gorgeous Custer State Park is and how awesome their bison herd is. It is literally one of the most beautiful parks. It's not the biggest, it's not the most grandiose, but it's one of the most beautiful parks you'll ever see in America, and it is just managed absolutely perfectly. So Chad is here again, and then we've got first time on the podcast John Graves, who is got probably one of the coolest jobs I've ever seen in my entire life, and I'll let John talk about that job. But John is also just newly moved to Wyoming from Colorado and is starting up his own bison ranch here over the last year. They've been planning this for a long time, so we're really going to dive into – this is a bison-heavy show. We're going to talk bison today, but Chad's already been on. John, I'm going to start with you and kind of have you introduce yourself so people don't have to listen to my voice and just kind of talk about, if you would, your background, your last job, because I think your last job is, a lot of people have seen it, whether it's been on ESPN or anywhere, probably one of the coolest jobs, ever. Why don't you tell everybody what your last job was?
Sure. So my last job, I worked for the University of Colorado.
Yep.
In Boulder.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. Will you pull that mic just a tiny bit closer to you? Like that.
Got me there.
That's perfect. Yep.
Cool.
Sorry.
No, you're
Hate
good.
to tell people what to do.
So University of Colorado, Boulder. They are the buffaloes there. And their live mascot, her name is Ralphie. She's a buffalo. She leads the football team out onto the field at the start of each half. I worked there doing that for 13 years. I did it when I was a student. I graduated. I came on as one of the coaches and ran the program for several years there. 13 years in total. It's very unique tradition. There's only 52 live mascots in college sports across the nation. Ralphie's probably the greatest one there is. To see a 1,300-pound female buffalo run out onto the field, it's pretty something special.
And not just running out on the field like that. Ralphie is hauling butt, for lack of a better word, like literally with a team of people and you and, obviously you have a predecessor that's taken over your job.
Yeah.
But man, it's no joke. That's like a Toyota Tundra with a mind of its own, but trained very well. But that thing is moving at 15, full speed for a human running.
Oh yeah. When she runs around the field, it's about 220 yards that she runs. She's highly trained, by the way.
Right.
We average about 20 miles per hour. So there's 5 people that run with Ralphie at a time. The rest of the team, a team of 15, is out in the field for the run to make sure nothing gets in her way when she's running, people, balls, things like that. But everybody knows Ralphie for her run out onto the field. But, when I was there, it was kind of my mission and my goal, and the Ralphie handlers, the students who run with Ralphie and myself, we kind of changed things up a little bit, and we put more of an emphasis on educating people about buffalo.
Right.
That's very important. Yeah, the tradition of Ralphie running on the field, that's great. That's awesome. Coolest thing ever, right? But we wanted to take that a step beyond, because most people in the Colorado, Denver, Boulder area, they don't know about buffalo. They've never seen them before. They don't know much about them. So we do public appearances with Ralphie, and she would be set up before the game for people to come take pictures of her, just see her from afar, from a safe distance. We have a special pen that she's in and a custom trailer for her. And we were just there to answer questions they might have, whatever it is. How much does she weigh? Something simple as that. She was 1,300 pounds. She was a little on the heavy side for a female buffalo, but anything, we just answered questions they might have about buffalo, just tried to educate them as best we could, just spread that knowledge. That's what we were all about.
Yeah, and that's a good segue. So you're not, that was just a small part of what you're part of the bison industry. So you also work actively and are on the staff at the Rocky Mountain Bison Association. Talk a little bit about that, because I think, when you look at bison as an industry, there's regions around the country. There's a National Bison Association, and then you have territories or other regional bison associations, and it's pretty remarkable because everybody gets along better than just about any organization as an industry as a whole. And again, I know I'm new at this, but man, talk about different regions. There's not a lot of animosity. Every now and then you get into some scientific and DNA talk where, people have different opinions about certain things, but as a whole, it's one of the coolest organizations or industries that I've ever seen. And people are just absolutely, one, the animals come first, and two, the love of the animals is next. And it's, so you're also part of the Rocky Mountain Bison Association. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, I'm the president of the Rocky Mountain Bison Association. My wife, Jen, she's our secretary. We have a great association. You kind of just hit on this. Regionally, it's a big association, and then nationally, all the bison ranchers get along.
Yes.
It's a niche market for bison, raising bison. I am by no means an expert. The next person down the road, they're not an expert. But when you get 10 people together to talk something through, they're all there to help each other out. And it's all for the betterment of the species, of the industry, of the animal. That's first and foremost. And so that is what makes the bison industry so different, is that everybody wants to work together. Everybody wants to help each other out. People jokingly compete against each other, right? Because we have sales, and they're like,
absolutely.
My bull's better than your bull, this and that. But at the end of the day, we're all friends. Everybody gets along. Everybody wants to help each other out. If you have an issue out on your ranch, you call the next closest bison rancher, man, they'll jump in their truck. They'll haul butt down to your place and help you out, whatever it is. If it's Roundup, anything. So, looking back at the Rocky Mountain region, the Rocky Mountain Bison Association, we represent Colorado, Wyoming, New Mexico, and we have members in other states as well. But we just, as a regional association, we just focus on the regional issues, but we do a lot of work with the National Bison Association as well, just helping them out, supporting them in their mission, because they have the resources to go nationally to help out and lobby for issues at the federal level that help out the whole industry. So, it's just, I don't know how many people out there are part of associations, but I'm a part of a few, and the bison associations are full of the best people ever. No doubt about that one.
Eccentric and fun and just smart. And yeah. I mean, I can't think of a better word than eccentric, because you go and it's, everybody from people with bees next to their bank account, next to somebody who has 8 bison, that, and everybody treats everybody just with so much respect. There's no, hey, I'm better at this, or hey, you're new at this. It's, hey, try this, try that, try a holistic course, go to this ranch course, read this book. If you have questions, let me know. It's just across the board.
Bert, I'll just throw in there on that.
Yeah, please do, Chad.
It's looking back in almost 30 years of being involved with the industry, or business as I call it, but it's always been like that. And it's something even today, with new guys coming in, to quickly pick up on that. But like I said, it's fun competition. But at the end of the day, yesterday I had a phone call from a gentleman that bought some calves and started out several years ago from Kentucky. Bought calves from the park and got started. I haven't heard from him in years. And, he's having an issue right now, and called and asked for some advice. And, dealing with halfway across the country, I wasn't able to pinpoint exactly, but directed him to our local vet so he could have his vet contact them. And like John said, I mean, if somebody's close, relatively close, they're willing to jump in and hightail it over there to help give them a hand. And that has been one thing over the years that has been consistent in this business.
Yeah, and you we've experienced that firsthand with you. We had a couple bulls that we bought from the park, at the auction. And, just where we had them here in Wyoming, they got out. It was a pretty rough area with, big hills. I wouldn't say mountains, but pretty close to mountains, and a lot of elk and stuff moving through there. And, we just had a couple animals get out. And the first thing you said is, hey, I can, bring my horses and I can be over there in a couple hours. What do you need help? And, that's not why I called you, or that's not why I talked to you. It was more of mannerisms and saying, hey, we're new at this with these animals. What do you is there any advice you can give us? Cause we're dealing with bulls that you were intimate with, cause you're intimate with your whole herd, and, you didn't need bad. It was just like, hey, I can be over there in a truck with my trailer at my horses. I'll be over there ready to go.
Yep.
And that's just, I think that happens in the cattle industry and a lot of livestock and ag industries, but the bison industry, for me, it's just been absolutely phenomenal. Nobody judges you when you make a mistake. They're like, oh, that happened to me in 1982 here, and then here's what you can do to fix, maybe try this, and this, or talk to this person, or, maybe use this fencing technique, whatever it is, or feed. It doesn't matter. But,
and that's one thing you hit on too. Both you guys did, is we don't want new people to make the mistakes we've already made.
Right.
If you can avoid it. So.
Yeah. And I think that's across the board. And I think, we live in a time in America where there's a lot of competition, and you'll have people that will say, man, I want you to do good. And then they'll kind of turn and just not as good as me. And you just don't see that in the bison industry. I'm sure it's out there. It's, it's human nature, but for the most part, everybody I've ran into wants you to succeed in the same manner they do, because at the end of the day, these animals were down to a couple thousand animals, or maybe even less. You and I have had this conversation. You obviously have, I don't think there's ever going to be a true number of how low this got, but, you're talking to the hundreds or a couple thousand animals at one point of a species that almost disappeared. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty remarkable. And John, you guys had a pretty big life-changing event in the last year.
Yeah.
You decided to pack up shop and say goodbye to a job that you loved. And I know it was hard for you to walk away from. I saw your posts on social media and how much emotion you had for that job and the people and how proud you were of doing that job. But what did you guys, and if you're listening, this John and his wife on their social media, they're day by day, hour by hour detailing the process of getting a loan, buying the land, building a house, building a fence system, building corrals, and buying buffalo to start their own ranch operation for a first generation ranching family. Talk a little bit about that, if you will.
Yeah,
because it is a big leap to take. I mean, for the most part, in my head, it's like the 1800s and people moving from the East Coast out west for the first time. You're basically doing that. You're buying some land and starting a livestock operation with an animal that is I think it's the most American animal ever. Sorry.
Yeah. No,
I'm passionate about this, and I'm super excited because it's fun to watch what you guys are doing.
So first check out our website, jgbison.com. And we have our blog on there. We're blogging about every single thing we do. We try to post at least a couple blogs a month on our process of everything we're doing. And so follow along on there on social media at JG Bison. But so it was actually in December of 2019, my wife and I came up to Sheridan to visit some friends. We stopped in the coffee shop to see Bert, obviously. And my wife and I, we love to work. We've both always had two jobs. We currently still have two jobs, and we love to work. And we got to a point where we need to take a vacation. So we came up to Sheridan December 2019. We were sitting on Main Street freezing, and we're like, you know what? We need to move up here. We need to do it. We'd always talked about starting our own bison ranch. It's going to be small, only 30 head when we finish out. But we made the decision, started looking for ranches, decided to put our house up for sale back in Colorado. We sold it instantly during the pandemic when everything was closed down. I don't know if we were lucky or stupid or what, but it was definitely stressful, leaving our jobs back in Colorado, moving up here. We found some great land pretty close to town, 172 acres of some good hills on there too. So actually grazable acres, we're at about 250 grazable acres. It's all documented on our blogs about working with the NRCS, getting some fences designed, just the whole process. So make sure you check that out. It's scary. It's terrifying, starting out from nothing we've been around bison for a long time and making the decision, let's go in this. And you can't just do something partially. You have to just do it. You have to commit. You have to do it. And so that's what we did. We sold our house in Colorado in May of 2020. We bought land in Sheridan in August of 2020. And we hope to have the house built here in June of 2021. We have a great well that we got dug out there with a local company. We have some fantastic contractors we're working with. And, you know, if you need any recommendations, look on our blog. We're calling them out on our blog too. So we've worked with some great local people here in Sheridan to help us out. But it's a slow process for us. You know, we're not going to take out tons of money in loans because this is it's not a hobby. It's a part-time thing for us.
Right.
We still work full-time. Jen, my wife, she has 2 jobs. I have 2 jobs. And, you know, we'll get there eventually. And we hope by the end of the summer of 2021 and going into the fall of 2021 is when we'll finally bring animals onto the land. So we're super excited. And
Exciting.
We've had a lot of help from people help through this, and we're excited.
Awesome. So shifting gears, multi-generational bison ranch and family. Talk a little bit. I know you guys got to know Chad if you listened to the episode where Carrick and I went over and we're in the park with Chad. But talk about, if you don't mind, talk about kind of your family and what you guys do now and how you got into this.
Well, try to shorten it up from the long version, which I get a little windy on. But anyway, grew up in Southwest Minnesota, so I'm a Minnesota farm boy. Growing up, we farmed with my dad and grandpa and my brother, a couple thousand acres of corn and soybeans. But we also had, real early growing up, grandpa and dad fed some beef cattle, and then we had hogs too, off and on over the years. But we had some livestock, so I guess I got interested in the bison, like we visited on the last podcast, when I went to college at South Dakota State. And kind of a roundabout way, I was going to college for landscape design, and had my first semester up at Brookings there, had a public speaking class, and one of our first assignments was a 25-minute informative speech. And I thought, man, what am I going to talk about for that long to keep me interested, let alone anybody else? And so I went home that weekend for harvest. It was soybean harvest, and saw Blue Mountain State Park in Laverne, Minnesota had a small bison herd, and they had their auction coming up in a few weeks. And I thought, buffalo and bison, that kind of interests me. So I went to the sale, met a few guys raising them, went and visited their operations, and then it's just kind of history from there. As, like I said, traveling. My wife was my girlfriend, and at the time, Susie, we would travel, and I'd see a big fence, you know, and
we're looking over there because she's sitting, you know, in the studio here. She wouldn't come on the podcast, which I don't blame her. But she's a big part of this, as are your kids. You know, you guys.
Yep. So it kind of just went from there. Moved out west to central South Dakota for 4 years. We were on a beginning operation there, and then went to central Colorado for about 1.5 years on a operation there. And we ended up back in South Dakota when the herd manager position at Custer Park came open, and threw my name in the hat, and was the lucky one for that. And now it's been 19.5 years we've been there. But I've also always had something going on the side.
Yeah, so in addition to managing the park animals, which, you know, again, typically ranchers don't talk too much about how many animals they have and stuff, but the park, the park, you said, I think between 900 and 1,000 animals in a given time.
Yep.
So you're managing those animals. And then kind of a ratio, because you manage these, and people always ask this question because I say it all the time. I've never heard anybody say bison or buffalo. And I always have to reiterate this on every episode we talk about bison. Bison and North American buffalo, same animal. And it's not a dumb question. I get asked in the coffee shop 5 times a day. You know, somebody will come up and kind of whisper, is there a difference between buffalo and bison? Yeah. And, you know, there is if you look at other parts of the world. You know, South America, Asia, Australia, South Africa, you know, there's Cape water buffalo, there's Cape buffalo, there's water buffalo, and there's a North American buffalo or a bison. So when you see your buffalo and bison in terms of North America, same animal.
Yep.
But, people will also ask the question, how many bulls to cows do you have for a herd? So a herd at a park that's managed really well, 1,000 animals, what's the ratio of bulls? Because people are fascinated by bison to begin with, but I'm noticing how fascinated people are with big bulls. It's just, it's America. The biggest one's always the one that people are super focused on.
Yep.
So how many bulls do you typically run with per cow?
So in the park, we run a little heavier than what I guess industry standard would be, but we're about a 1-to-6 ratio right now. And that's just because of they're out there year round. With them, and like I mentioned earlier, we're kind of minimal hands-on management at the park. We do the roundup to take off basically the surplus for the year to control the population for the habitat we have. So we run about a 1-to-6, and we pick all of our replacements, male and female, going back out at coming 3 years of age, so 2.5 years age. So typically, depending on the herd size where we're at, I'll turn out about 10 to 12 2.5-year-old bulls for breed bulls each year.
Gotcha. So, and you guys have big bulls.
Yeah,
there's a lot of big bulls in the country. And also, if you're listening, again, I'm new at this, but I don't think the goal of bison ranchers across the board is to raise the biggest, baddest bull. It's more of, and you guys know a lot more about this than I will. So it's not a question of raising the biggest, largest, baddest bull. There's a lot more that goes into the science behind it of genetics and, a lot more with that. But you guys have pretty big bulls just naturally through the process. You have pretty big bulls compared to your average bison bull, correct? You and I had talked about that.
Our average 10-year-old bulls, I figure right at 1,900 to 2,000 pounds for the average. I've had them vary anywhere from about 1,600 some up to 2,600 at over the years doing the trophy hunts that we manage. So
yeah, talk a little bit about that since you mentioned it. Trophy hunts. So you have a park. You've only got so many square miles of state property, and it has to be managed. That's the way it goes. This is there's other ranches, farmers, everybody around there. You have to manage the herds. You said again, I think a lot of the parks, Caprock, Yellowstone, you manage the animals in the least amount of hands-on as possible so they can naturally just be buffalo. But you have to manage those animals, and one of the ways you do that, at some point, bulls get to a point where they need to be harvested. Talk a little bit about that, if you will, because I think people are fascinated with that as well in the hunting community, and I think there's more bison ranchers and bison operations in parks that there's a lot of people that don't understand that. Why would you kill a buffalo? Why would somebody hunt a buffalo? Why do you need to kill a buffalo? Do you mind talking a little bit about that?
No, I don't. And it boils down to somewhat its economics, but like you said, we're limited on a land base because of the park's area. So we've got a little over 20,000 grazable acres is what's considered grazable that uses. And our two main species are the bison and the elk. So within the park, like on the hunts, we figure through their 10th season is up to what they're good for breeding. After that, physically, they start beginning to decline. So those bulls, like we talked about last time, from 3-year-olds to 10-year-olds, bull in his physical prime, in my opinion, is about 8 years old. That's when they're matured. They may get a little heavier after that, but as far as competing out in the world against those other bulls, when they hit about that 10-year-old age range is when they physically start beginning to decline some. It varies a little bit by individuals, but so we've, since the early 1960s, the park has offered hunts anywhere from 8 to 10 or so a year, and it's a permit drawing.
So anybody can apply for
Anybody can apply for it. We draw currently for 8 of them. Right now, there's $6,500. So, it is a substantial, revenue flow that comes in. It's a 3-day guided hunt.
And you guide that hunt. You're out there shoulder to shoulder with whoever wins those hunts.
And the big part of it is we're harvesting 10-year-old or older animals. So I've had the oldest, because we always get asked what's the oldest one we've taken, and we've had one that made it 17. And because of the terrain of the park, the hunt, like any hunt, is finding the animal. And in this way, we're out in that terrain trying to locate those 10s plus, and then also we're eligible for Boone and Crockett record book. So a majority of the guys are coming looking for a record book bull, and that's where it comes in as a guide, trying to estimate what that score will be on that bull for that hunter. And
which you're also certified to is that correct word, certified? You're certified to do measurements?
I mean, I green score them just to give them an idea after we're done, but I guess it wouldn't be certified. It's just something I learned after
okay.
to how they Boone and Crockett measures them. And there's other entities out there like Safari Club, and they do it a little bit different. But because we're eligible for Boone and Crockett, that's what a lot of the guys are coming looking for a book entry bull. So, but it's a managing the population was what it really boils down to. So otherwise you have all these bulls that are wandering around, and a animal unit, when you start talking about managing, a bull is about 1.5 animal units. So he's 50% more than what a cow is.
Right.
So I know when I first started, I got all geared up on these hunts and thought, at that time it was $4,000 or $5,000 we got for them, and thought, man, if we did another, 5 a year of these, look at I guess it was 5,000. I'm thinking the extra revenue, but when you start figuring your carrying capacity for your land, that area that's grazing, keeping those extra bulls would displace a certain number of cows. So when you start figuring your market and your economics of it, you're making more on raising more calves with cows than you were at increasing bulls. So it's something that, there's new producers or people getting into the bison business when they come, and I get several calls a year at the park there, and myself personally over the course of a year asking, I'm thinking of getting into buffalo, and at the moment, a lot of them think they just want to own some, and I start asking these type of questions. Well, where are you at? What, and it depends where you're at in the country, what that carrying capacity is. You get further west where it's drier, you can be upwards of 100, even in the southwest, 200 acres an animal to support them if you're just grazing and not supplementing. To where you get back in the eastern part of the country, you can run an animal per acre. So it varies a lot. And I start asking them these questions. Well, what's your objective? Do you just want to get up in the morning and drink a cup of Bison Union coffee and look out the window and say, hey, I'm happy I get to look at them and watch them? And that happens a lot where people do that going into it, and then all of a sudden they've got too many and they don't have any grass left, and they don't have any corrals, any way to handle them. And then all of a sudden they're starting to get out because they've got too many. And then all of a sudden they're in a quandary, and it's like, now what do I do? Because the neighbors are mad because they're on their place, or they're getting into their crops, whatever it is. But now all of a sudden it's a crisis. So over the years, heard a lot of instances where that has happened, and then person gets to a point where they're just like, I'm done, I'm out of it.
We're going to sell everything and move on.
But it's, so like John's doing, I got to commend you on that, because I didn't start that way, as having a detailed plan like that.
So it's not a good idea to buy a herd of bison before you have a ranch or somewhere to put them.
Not the best idea. Okay. No,
duly noted.
Lots of folks
duly
will
noted.
Just throw them out on, that 3-wire fence is good.
Yeah.
It might work for a while depending where your animals come from, and how much they're handled. When I got started, I remember running around. There was a little town in eastern South Dakota, not too far from college there. I heard somebody had 5 or 10 head. So I wandered over there one day, and they had 8 or 10 head, and the fence was waist high, and their corral was pallets stood up. You know, here comes this big old bull, and of course they interacted all the time with them and fed them cubes and stuff. You know, I just remember this big old bull come walking up, and he puts his head over this pallet, and I give him a cube out of the bucket, you know, and I'm thinking, well, if he put any weight on it, it'd just smash in front of him and he'd be out. But, you know, they had like 10 to 20 acres, and they always had a hay bale in front of them. They bucket fed them a couple times a day. I mean, they were happy. And that's the one thing I tell people, you know, as long as you have a happy bison, usually they're going to stay where they're at. But when they're not happy, that's when you're going to have issues. They're going to start.
Well, and that's, I one of the things that I've been fascinated with them since I could walk, but spending more time around them, when people start asking questions, I have to explain it. The only way that I can explain it is in the sense that somebody who lives in America can understand is, if you take all the livestock in America, from antelope to beef cows to llamas, pick anything, and then equate those animals to a professional sports league in the United States. And I think the bison is basically a mix between a running back and a linebacker in the NFL. People just don't understand how athletic they are.
They don't.
You know, I've seen a 2,000-pound bull jump over the bed of a pickup truck or stand at a 6-foot fence from a standstill, nudge it and see if he could open the gate. Gate doesn't open. Takes a leap like a dog jumping up on a couch and clears a 6-foot fence without its belly or its legs touching the fence at all. And this is a 2,000-pound animal that can turn on a dime, that can run 35 to 40 miles an hour. It's hard to explain that to people until they see it in person, or see, you're driving through Yellowstone and, 500 animals come by and something happens and they get spooked and you see them move and you're like, oh, okay. Like, this is a whole nother level of livestock, a whole nother level of athleticism. But then you flip the coin over, and it's also one of the most gentle, humble animals that I've ever seen in my life. Like, if they're happy and they're comfortable, they're at peace with the whole world. But that peace can go away real fast. And I think people, you've seen it firsthand for 19 years. People will see them in that light, and it's easy to let your guard down and go, oh man, that's a big fluffy animal, and forget about the sharp points on their head and how athletic they are. But, that's one of the things that impressed me the most. I knew real fast, like, okay, you have to be on your toes if you're around bison and stay away from them. If you go ahead, John, you were going to say something.
Well, that's just it. Let's throw this disclaimer in here.
Yeah.
Don't pet bison.
That's
don't do it.
Yeah. Don't do it.
Because you're absolutely right. I mean, 98% of the time they're just slowly walking, meandering, just grazing, doing nothing. And like you just said, they turn on a dime and they go crazy. Not that they're, for whatever reason it could be, but they are just so athletic, but they don't look athletic until they are athletic. So your average person out there who's seeing a bison for the first time, please stay away. Don't go up near them. Even ranchers, every rancher keeps a healthy distance from their herd. And these are ranchers that know their animals inside and out. They know their herd dynamics, characteristics. They can read their body language perfectly in the split second they look at them. They still keep a healthy distance from them. So, but you're absolutely right. These are magnificent animals that are just wonderful to work with, wonderful to be around. And I mean, they're the best North American animal out there. That's for sure. I
agree. Grizzly bears, wolves, everything. I've been around all these animals, and I worked at a zoo for a while and got to deal with big cats and gorillas. And even in the world, there's just something about this animal. They're just absolutely fascinating to me, more so than any other animal on the planet. Chad, I sidetracked you there. Sorry, we went down a rabbit hole. So in addition to managing 1,000 animals at one of the best parks in the country, you literally drive 5 miles away from the park, and that's where your home is situated, and you have your own bison herd there as well. And it's a family affair, which to me, it's not just you, it's across the board. And I think this is with everybody that's in livestock and agriculture in the United States. It's easy to forget where your meat comes from, or agricultural products, whether it's corn or bison, it doesn't matter. But I think the more that I dive into this and the more that I meet people, there's people like you that it's not just you and your wife, and it wasn't just your parents, your kids now that are in high school or a little bit older than that, they also own their own bison. And I think the more that I see that, Connor Buchel, some of these guys that are, that's a 21-year-old kid at Skull Creek up in North Dakota, he's he owns hundreds of bison, and he also is in college full time. But like your family, talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind. I don't want to invade your privacy, but
no.
Talk a little bit about your family, because I've met your kids, and they're just phenomenal, and they're just, they run their own animals. Which is crazy.
So like I said, I've always had something on the side going on with myself too, and that's just my upbringing. But so we've always had animals. I actually started with our own animals in 1992 back in Minnesota, and then when I moved west in 95, I left them behind with my brother at the time at the farm to take care of, and then that's another side of the family. We got him feeding for us on that ranch at the time, and now he's converted. He drank the Kool-Aid too, so he's in bison. They're in central Minnesota, and Backroads Bison. They just moved to a new operation up there in the last couple of years. So, so they run a few hundred cows up there in Minnesota, and then also feed a bunch. But
where are they? What state are they in?
They're in Minnesota,
okay.
Central Minnesota.
I just want to hear you say Minnesota.
Oh yeah, yep. It's funny, over the years, even after being gone for 25, almost 30 years, we get visitors at the park, and they say, "Where are you from?" Minnesota. Oh yeah, that's what I thought. I didn't pick that up yet, but anyway, with our family, we've got 3 kids. Hannah, who's newly married, her husband Matt are close by, and then our next 2, Grace and Isaac. Grace will be graduating from high school this year, and Isaac's a sophomore. So they all have their own animals also. We kind of started out several years ago with them, starting with some calves and taking care. And that's another thing about this industry is kind of had a local mentor that worked them out quite a deal on some late calves, and that's kind of how they got their start on those.
Yeah, it's so cool. You keep mentioning the industry, and why we're sitting here. Scott from Dakota Pure Bison, just sent me a text and asked if I was going to be in Rapid City at the conference next week. But I get like 10 of those a day now. I'm sorry that it interrupts you, but it's just funny, as we're sitting here, I have my phone, and it just saw that it was Scott who owns Dakota Pure Bison. Yep. Young guy. I don't know how old Scott is, but he's got to be in his late 20s, early 30s at the most, and he's running a couple thousand animals and has a meat company and stuff. But sorry to interrupt, but I keep saying that, and people listen. If you're listening and you have any, interest in bison or anything, like really dive into it and check out the associations and just start researching the industry. And there's Facebook pages. But like these guys said, nobody's ever going to make fun of you. People might laugh at you if you have some questions, but it's in a fun manner. But just check it out. Sorry, again, I keep
interrupting.
Laugh
with you, not at you.
Yeah, laugh with you, not at you. Or it's always followed up by, been there, done that. Let me help you out.
So, yeah, we lease a couple ranches right now in the eastern foothills of Black Hills. And currently we're about 1,200 acres, and we're going to be increasing that by several hundred more here this year. But we run about 130 head right now. Goal is to get to around 200. So combined with my day job at the park and then doing that on the side, it's pretty busy, and we're gearing up for Kremer Buffalo Company here. We've got a website coming out soon that's been just this morning looking at some of it. It's going to be pretty awesome when it comes
and I'm wearing
out,
one of your T-shirts you sent me. It's but all these, one of the things that's fun to watch, and again, it's a shameless plug for you guys because I can't do it enough, but you can support these ranches like your guys' Instagram. What's your Instagram? I know what it is, but
Kremer Buffalo.
Kremer Buffalo, and it's Kremer. But check these guys out, and you're not going to be a poser, even if you're not in the bison industry, by wearing one of these T-shirts. You can support these ranchers or bison. It's not. There's other industries where people are going to look at you and go, "Man, why is that person wearing a T-shirt if you don't raise bison?" That's not what this is about. These families do this day in and day out. And like John and his wife are starting their operation, and they have hats and T-shirts. And man, you can really support these industries by buying a $15 or $20 or $25 T-shirt and wear it proudly and support these guys. I don't think anybody in this industry is ever going to look at somebody who doesn't own bison wearing a ranch T-shirt and say, "Well, why are you wearing this shirt?" You don't. So support these guys. Check them out and check out their websites, and buy some of their merchandise and wear it proudly that you're supporting, because every dollar. These guys aren't taking that money and buying fancy stuff with it. They're literally taking that money from T-shirts and hats and anything else they sell, and that money's going directly to raising more bison and growing the population of bison back from the brink. I think the industry as a whole, number's not accurate, but around 550,000 animals, which you think about it 100 years ago, again, there was a couple thousand maybe at the most. At one point there was a few parks, a few private ranchers, and a few zoos that had buffalo. So to be at 550,000, anytime you make a purchase, whether it's a tumbler or a t-shirt or a hat, you're supporting these families, and they don't abuse the money. The money goes straight back to the animals. So check them out. Yep. Sorry, I keep interrupting you, but I've had way too much coffee this morning. So you guys are growing your operation, and I know in the past, and I absolutely love beef cow ranchers. When I say beef cow, I mean your standard beef cow rancher. I love it. It's a great industry. It helped build this country. But beef cow ranchers, I think, are opening up a little bit. But I think one of the big differences between the bison industry and the beef cow industry is bison ranchers are really opening up and showing not just their successes, but also their failures. And you can watch these people grow their ranches, grow their operations, which I think is kind of new. And I think social media is helping that. You can actually watch John and his wife build a ranch and a house and start, building their corral and their fences. It's a cool process to watch. Likewise, follow Chad and his family, and you can really dive in and watch, from a distance. Watch. It doesn't matter if you're in New York City or LA. Check this stuff out and watch it every now and then. Follow their social media because it's fun to watch.
That's one thing I look in the last few months here visiting with you and watching John and Jen's operation coming along. But, on one hand, I sit here looking back at 30 years of doing this, and then how long you guys been in it. And I think you guys are way ahead of me because like I was listening to your interview with Buster here.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, why would people want to see a picture of that or a video of me out checking a water tank or something like that? But I got to think about it and look at it, and it's like, yeah, they don't see that. And I don't get to the cities that much, and when I do, it's like I'm a fish out of water. But it's like, I couldn't do that life, being in a concrete jungle and running down the road and big buildings and that. So I can see why there's an attractiveness for folks that they can look at it now, and we have the world in our pocket to
and I think
get away.
Well, and I think it's fun without getting too political. I think I think one of the things that we're at a real crossroads in this country that, is there some bad history in America? There is, but America's young. And I think we're righting a lot of the wrongs. And one of those things I think people are longing for right now is we're back on that lumberjack, rancher, farmer, outdoor guy with a lever action rifle, people and girls. But I think people are longing for kind of, people have always been fascinated in love with American history. You gotta take the bad with the good, but you also gotta take the good with the bad. And I think sometimes we get focused on kind of the bad or the dark spots in American history with slavery and other stuff and wars and the Civil War and stuff like that. But when you turn the corner to establishing the West and the railroads weren't always bad. And it's ironic for me to say that here because subsequently the railroads almost decimated the bison population because it gave people access and it got abused. But to your point, I think there's a lot of people out there that really want to watch that. If they're in a city, not even in a city, there's other people that are here in Wyoming, like just to be able to get on social media and watch somebody go out and water or just a camera, a webcam that's pointed at a water tank.
Yeah.
To watch a 2,000-pound bison or 4 of them or 10 of them come up and drink water in negative 15-degree weather. I'm fascinated by it. I watch it. So I think there's a lot of people. So it's fun to see, especially people like you that have been in this industry for so long and doing this. I think it's really, really fun that you guys are opening up and getting on social media. And you heard Buster, last guy on the planet. It took a year for that guy to get on social media. He wanted nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
But now the amount of people that I see, the positivity that he's pushing out and just showing his daily life, the good and the bad. Buster will make a post every other week about a flat tire on a trailer or a truck blowing up on him or cows getting out on the highway. It happens.
It happens.
And I think people were embarrassed in the past to say, oh, man, I had buffalo get out of a pasture. It's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It is. And I think, people can learn from that. When they see that, it used to be, well, I don't want us to look like we got a shitty, excuse the language, a bad ranching operation because our animals got out. But people can learn from that and watch that. And I think it'll also educate the public of, hey, if you're driving down the highway or road and a herd of bison are there, back off and call the police or call a local sheriff's department and say, hey, there's
slow down.
Yeah, they'll, slow down. But I think the more that people like yourself open up to social media, and I'm, obviously everything we have is a means to an end for me to be in the bison industry, but social media I think is a powerful tool, and used the right way, it's even more powerful in a positive manner.
And that is one thing I see, it's so easy to reach out and ask those questions. We're seeing new interest in people looking at getting into the industry, and actually for probably about the last 5 years, I would say. And particularly in the last year and a half, it's really, the interest has definitely increased. So starting out when I did in the early 90s, the market was just taking off, and we went through the 90s. And it was different then than it is today because of market conditions the way it was. But we saw an increase. I bought my first heifer calves at $900 in '92. What does
a heifer calf go for right now? I know the answer to that, but what?
So right now, this past year, average is probably in that $750 range. So, but like in the '92, that was probably the second or third year, from what I remember, prices had kind of been creeping up. So in '92, I bought my first 11 head at $900 a piece. We went through several years where it peaked. The '98, '99 season, those calves were worth $2,500 a piece. And then after that, it took 4 years. My second auction at Custer Park in '02, we had a collapse of the market, and they were, heifers were $96 a head. And I tell people that, and they're like, what? So they went from $2,500 to basically $100 in 4 years.
People couldn't get rid of them.
They couldn't get rid of them. They were doing whatever they could to get rid of them. I never did hear anybody just actually turning some loose, but I mean, a couple $100, come out to the ranch, we'll load one in your pickup. And of course, most people were buying them for meat, for the freezer.
Yeah, and I think, and that's, for folks that haven't been around livestock operations, it's easy to watch a big herd of bison getting called up to a feed truck or to move from pasture to pasture or section to section, or to see them just grazing. Oh, those are easy animals, but there's a lot more that goes into it. So if an animal sells for $700, how much does that animal cost to raise a year? And,
right.
Even in Wyoming, Dakotas, Montana, Colorado, this time of year, like right now, there's 5 feet of snow on the ground and it's 15 degrees. Yeah, our bison built, and they haven't been messed with too much. They're built to forage and get underneath the snow. Their heads are just basically a giant shovel sitting on they're basically a bulldozer to move snow out of the way. But you still got to supplement that as a rancher and buy hay. You got to take care of your animals. You got to, it's not cheap.
Yep. Nope.
The bison industry is not, no livestock operation is cheap, but I think people tend to forget that when you see it and go, oh man, that looks like it's pretty easy. It's easy, but it's also very, very expensive.
Yep.
For sure.
So
it can be. So watching as that happened over the years, what that allowed was it established a meat floor to the bison industry from that point going forward to where we're at today. So now, and like any of them, it's anything in ag, the prices go up and they come back down, and you have these cycles. And I get asked, quite a few times over the course of a year if that happens. And I said, what I've kind of seen in 30 years is we lag about, I'd say, about 7 years behind the beef industry is what I've kind of noticed. It varies a little bit, but that cycle, those ups and downs, we kind of follow that just like anything else. So we hit a peak again. We're kind of going over that peak a little, but it'll come back. We're small enough, I've seen over the years, that especially being at the park, with the way the industry watches the park auction every year that we do, the prices that happen there, one new player in the game can turn this market. I've seen that happen where, we're selling anywhere from 200 to 500 head a year at the park auction. You get a new player that comes in and buys a semi-load of animals, and it'll inflate them prices. And then everybody, that's kind of where things start taking off again. And there's a lot more to it now than there was 20 years ago, as far as what's happening out on the meat side of things, the business going out there too. So there's a lot more moving parts than there used to be to it. But I tell people you got to roll with the punches on it. It's like you said, it's expensive. You manage your costs is probably the best way to control what happens to you. It's nice to have all the new things, the hydraulic chutes and all that. If you can afford it, great. I tell people you got to look at your plan, make your plan.
That's detailed plan.
And I've seen operations with 20 head of animals that buy a $10,000 or $15,000 hydraulic chute, and you go, wow, that's, that could make you or break you,
right,
depending on the operation. But there's also, you got to consider, if having a piece of equipment like that will replace cost of labor, having other people. I mean, you got to weigh all that out. So like you said, there's a lot more to it than just watch them stand out there grazing. So,
and they are pretty hardy, they're simple animals. And as I get more into this and watch other ranches that run very, very tight operations and watch their bottom line, and, obviously again, the animals come first, the health of the animal comes first, the safety comes first, but then when you look at the other side of it in black and white, they're very, very good at managing how much they spend and how much they make, and have a viable ranching operation. But the animals themselves are pretty simple. If you have good fences, good grass, you have good water, they're pretty simple animals and they're happy. How many times a year do you put hands on bison? For you, like your personal herd or the customer, your roundup once a year, correct?
Right. So at the park, we do one roundup once a year, just to sort off the surplus number we're going to take off for the year.
Which has become a huge.
It has. The roundup now has become the event.
How many people were at this last one? I know the governor of South Dakota was there. A lot of big personalities were there, but then on top of that, the fascination with this roundup and these animals grows every year. How many people were at the roundup last year?
It does. This past year, they estimated about 20,700, I think was the number. So we've been over 20,000 spectators to come and watch 6 of the last 7 years, I think it is. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So it's just watching that. My first year there, and I started roundup weekend, and it was just unbelievable. Before sunrise, the stream of cars, the headlights coming over the hill for 2 miles as far as I could see. They just kept coming. I thought, man, after it was all done with, they waited for 4 hours out here in the morning to watch 45 minutes of buffalo running by. But I realized the value for the state of South Dakota. After a few years, it's immeasurable in my opinion, because those people, I've visited with people from Europe, from Asia, all around the world, and people from probably just about every state in the U.S. to come and watch that, and the excitement that they have to see it.
Yeah, and that's, for me, for what we're talking about, you guys can just go to Google and Google, Custer Park Roundup, Bison Roundup, whatever, Custer Park Bison Roundup, and you'll see the photos. And you watch this giant crowd of people, but what always catches my eye is there's a lot of adults there. There's people from all over the world, but then you see like a 3 or 4 year old kid who's just got their eyes wide open and a giant awe smile on their face. And that's cool to me because you just made a bison fan forever. Yeah. And I think that the industry having roundups and having the access, and John, you guys, the Denver, the Bison Conference that's usually in Denver every year, you guys have the ability, which is fun to watch right down in downtown Denver. You can walk down to the pens down there and see, there is a little bit of competitive showmanship with some of these bison. People are proud of their genetics. They're proud of the animals they've raised. But when I was there with you I think it was last year before last, walking around with you guys again, you see adults fascinated with them, but it's fun to watch kids that have never been around a bison just stare and are in awe of
it's really cool to see that.
It's just fun to
it's
watch.
So cool.
But every time I look at the roundup photos, you see this giant crowd, then all of a sudden, if you really zoom in, you see like a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old that's just like, boom, you got him. Like that's a kid that's going to be fascinated by bison for the rest of their life. So, and you guys do the roundup. You can also, you guys have a lottery for that too, for people to actually ride horseback.
Yep.
In the roundup, which is super unique, I think, to be able to go to a state park and be on horseback in a state park, but to be part of a roundup on horseback of, I would say, America's animal, period. Like for me, I think the bison is America's animal. But you guys talk a little bit about the lottery for all those people out there that are horse folks that would want to apply for that.
So we have a horseback team of up to 60 riders. We draw for about 20 to 25 public riders come help each year. So it's a lottery drawn. You can find the application on the website. Usually has to be in by mid-June, and then we'll do a drawing and get information out to the folks. But it's a 2.5 day or a day and a half deal, I guess. So we do a safety orientation, and then a orientation ride the afternoon before. We split into 3 teams, so you get to meet the folks you're going to be riding with, and we kind of just go out and ride through the route so they know the next morning what's going to happen, and then the next day we ride back out to the west fence, and when everything's ready and hopefully everybody's got their car parked and ready to stand out there on the hill and watch, then we'll give the go ahead and we bring them in. So but yeah, it's quite an experience. You get to run with 1,500 head of buffalo, trying to move them, and made some changes over the years how we do that, but usually within about an hour we've got them in. Early on, we had one year that after an hour we were back to the fence starting over again. So they kind of learned over the years what to watch for, and I get people ask me, friends that are part of our core team, they have more of a tendency to notice other folks having problems with their horses or whatever it is than I do, because I'm watching. I said, I miss that because I'm watching the herd dynamics to try and see where we need to put pressure or pull pressure off and make sure we don't have gaps so they don't get away and all that. So, but the last, like you mentioned, the last thing we want is anybody get hurt. Yep. So we go through about an hour briefing, what to watch for in the animals, what our objectives are, pair those folks up with some experienced people, and then we go out and do our little orientation ride, and we're back there the next morning and get after it and get it done. So, but it is an event. It's quite an event to see. I tell everybody it's something you got to see at least once. So
yeah, for sure. I'm excited to go this next year. I'm super excited. It just where I was going with the original question. That's about it. You guys bring those animals in once a year.
Yep.
And you sort off some animals.
Yep.
You sort off some calves or some bulls. And then after that
they go back out.
They go back out, and that's it. And yep. Other than driving through the park to make sure that, there's no predatory issues or no animals that are, injured or in distress. You guys are pretty hands off like that.
Yep.
And not just you guys, I think that's as a whole, people
yep.
tend to, bison are very, very hardy, and they've
yeah.
been here for millions of years, and you're not pulling calves. I think there is some cases where that happens and animals will get abandoned and you have to take a calf and figure out how to get that calf back with the herd at some point. But pretty hardy and remarkable animal that
yep.
is self-sustaining for the most part.
Yeah. And then the other side of that too, where you're looking at is, on each private operation, and mine's going to be different than yours or John's. It just depends where you're at, what your objectives are. Like our herd, we're moving. We have several pastures, and we're always looking at a grazing plan of monitoring what's out there for grass, precipitation, anything in ag, precipitation is your big wild card out there. So, we're monitoring all that, and you're always planning, replanning, figuring that out, doing water developments, cross fencing. So like in the park, over the years, we've habituated the herd to moving them with horseback. My own herd, we use a cube with them, so we're using treats to lead them, and it's less stressful, it's easier, takes less time, takes less labor to do that. So if I want to move them to the next pasture, I take a bucket of cubes out there, and they're trained to my call, and they'll come running, and lead them over the gate and take them to the next pasture. So the other side of it too, I tell people you got to look at is, you can let them go more in a wild state and just do their thing. They're not going to be as habituated to people, but when they do get out, for me being in the Black Hills and the timber and terrain and stuff, if that happens or when it happens, I can just take the bucket out there and yell for them and lead them back home. So there's a lot of peace of mind to having that too. And
yeah, kind of that philosophy of it's easier to pull a rope than it is to push one.
Exactly.
And I think, I'm learning, and I've learned the hard way a few times, that bison are like stubborn people in a sense that sometimes you got to let people and bison feel like they're in charge,
Oh, yeah.
and manage them that way. And Nick Campbell, who's obviously one of my partners, but a good, he's been in this industry a long time and is probably one of the most laid back guys you'll ever meet. But, I watched him and just how that philosophy of pulling them instead of pushing them, it's pretty cool to watch.
Yep.
When you give them that little bit, they're smart enough. I wouldn't say they're as intelligent in some ways as a dog, but if you let a bison and a herd of bison think that they're in charge, but there's that fine line, because when it goes wrong, it goes real wrong, and you're dealing with an animal that we just talked about the physical characteristics. They'll run up the side of a mountain, mouth open, tongue hanging out, and they won't stop. They'll run nonstop for an hour, and they won't quit. They open up that windpipe, and they're gone.
Yep.
But it's fun to watch. I wanted to drive that home because people always ask that question of me, and I defer people to, the publications that are out there and other stuff, because I'm just brand new at this, but they're pretty self-sustaining animals if you just let them be bison. To me, they're just fascinating. I think if you probably took every bison in North America and just let them go, they'd figure, we'd be back to 30 million animals. They would figure out a way. They're pretty hardy animals.
Yep.
Oh, they are.
And that's one of the questions, because we're having temperatures here, like right now this morning, I think, it's negative 28 at my place this morning with no wind, which is cold even for Wyoming in this part of the world. It gets like this every few years, but it's pretty chilly here. When do bison start feeling the cold effects? Because that's a magic question, and John's laughing and shaking his head because it's a magic question, but my experience being around them, when you get down to 10, 20, 15 degrees above zero, it's funny to watch the dynamic, because they start, like dogs get the zoomies, like your dog will get the zoomies and run around the house. Bison start doing that at 20 degrees, 10 degrees. You start watching them, they start having a lot of fun. Both of you guys, kind of your take on, that's one of the things that I like the most about the bison. They're one of the only animals in the entire world, and the only livestock that will turn and face a storm and face into the wind versus putting their butt into the wind. But talk a little bit about bison in cold weather, because it's remarkable. I don't think there's a cooler animal on the planet when it comes to cold weather, except maybe polar bears or seals and stuff like that up in the Arctic.
There's no doubt that bison are not domesticated, right? They are designed, they're still essentially wild animals.
Right.
They really are. And on JG Bison social media, we try to do what I call hashtag Bison Fact Friday.
Yep.
Because it was going to be so cold this week, and I actually did one yesterday that talked about how many hair follicles bison have.
A great post. Yeah, I saw it.
It's like 7 to 10 times as many hair follicles per square inch than cattle do. So they just have so much more hair, right?
It's more like a wool. I tell people that. It's
yeah.
actually closer to wool when you're feeling it than it is like a beef cow hide.
That's totally right. And everybody has seen the classic winter pictures of the bison just coated in snow.
Yeah, a lot of those going around this week.
Yeah, it's because they're so well insulated. That snow just falls, lands on them. They are totally fine. But you touched on it a minute ago. Bison just love to play in the cold weather. It's really fun to see.
It's cool to watch.
Even the older ones, they get like those dog zoomies. They just start hopping around and having a good time playing around, and their metabolism kind of slows down in the wintertime. So that's kind of how they're able to sustain themselves through the winter, and just how they've evolved over the years. They're able to forage for grasses underneath deep snow. They'll also consume snow when there's no water available. So that helps them out in these freezing cold temperatures as well. And, they are designed to handle it. People think they're cold out there and, they need shelter, windbreaks, blah, blah, blah. They really don't.
I've talked to a lot of ranchers that have been doing this a long time, and, that will have, they've built some overhead covers, stuff like that, even with smaller operations or hand-fed animals that, just didn't assimilate back. Long story short, if people will build an overhead shelter and animals won't ever go in it. They're fine. Yeah. They're totally fine. And even like this week, the parks, Yellowstone, everything is cold right now, and the animals are just rocking and rolling. They're just being bison.
They are.
I'll tell people about that. If you've got terrain out there, they'll find that spot out of the wind, whichever way it's blowing out of, they'll go find that spot out there. So like you say, you put a windbreak up, they may use it. They're probably not gonna.
Right.
But they'll go over the hill on that spot where they're getting a little sunshine and out of the wind. They know where that is. They'll go to it. So,
yeah.
Yeah, herd dynamics, and you and I touched on this, but, it's fun because when I was there with you a few weeks ago, your bulls will, they'll come in during rut, and I explain that every time I get a chance because people ask that question a lot. But they're much like elk. Bison have a rut season, which is 30, 45 days long. It's typically in, June, July, August time frame. But then after that, the bulls will break off and either go off lone on their own, or they'll form some little bachelor herds and move off, which is, remarkable. And we got to see that at your place a couple weeks ago, watching 5 or 6 just massive bulls just kind of lumber, and it's a perfect word for them in my mind. They're just lumbering, and they are big, and they're, you got 3 or 4 or 5 of them together, and it is awesome to watch. But that's kind of typical, correct? It's talk a little bit about herd dynamics and breeding and gestation.
Yeah. So, gestation for the females is right at 9 months. So, but in the park, like I said, we don't do any separating with the herd at all. The bulls are out there year round, and we don't supplement. So whatever forage is out there is what their nutrition is, and we get a few off-season calves, but very few for the number of it. I kind of gauge that at the park there each year by how many calves we have that have some cinnamon on them at roundup time, so late September. And I've seen that vary anywhere from 2 or 3 up to a couple dozen over the years, which really you're looking at the nutrition of those animals the previous season when they bred. So it really was dependent upon how your prior growing season was and nutrition for those animals. So whether they bred in the first cycle, which is normally, like I said, during the rut at the park, the peak of our rut is the last week of July, first week of August. But you'll start seeing some rutting activity, the bulls roaring around and sniffing usually by the 4th of July. So they're starting to seek that out. But after the rut, them bulls start splitting up. They usually go in little bachelor groups, anywhere from 2 to 5 or so. Sometimes you'll see a dozen or 15 actually together, and they move around. Sometimes they bunch up. I've seen groups of 30, 40 bulls in the winter, and for a day or two, and then they split up and go their ways again. But typically they're in little bachelor groups, and I've noticed they're like individual bulls or groups over the years have a drainage that they'll go back to for 2 or 3 seasons. They'll spend the whole winter in this drainage and maybe not move a mile. And then when, June, July starts rolling around, you start seeing them traveling to more where the cow herd in the park. Our prairie area is mostly on the east and south end, and that's where the cows primarily stay. But those bulls will be way up in the northwest corner, and you'll see them along the highways. And the next day they'll be a couple more miles down the road, and they're just lumbering along, like you said, heading for the cows, and they know where the area is, where they're heading to. So you'll see that happen. And typically we've had a report of the first calf within a week of the 1st of April each year in the park. So last year, I believe it was the 23rd of March. But usually it's those first several days of April is when we'll get the first report or see it. So, but the majority of them come in May. Probably the last week to first 10 days of May. Last week of April, first 10 days of May is when the majority of the calves come. So, and that's becoming more and more popular now. We've actually had a competition in the park, guess the date, through social media the last few years when the first calf's going to be seen. So it builds up, and as soon as they're out there, then we get people looking at weekend trip, coming.
Just come out and see the calves.
To see the calves, and so we get lots of calls. When's a good time to come, and it's like, well, you don't want to come too early because there's a few, but lots of times, depending on the cow, they like to go they don't like to be bothered, so they go off. And they'll
form a bit of a nursery. The cows and calves
they'll make a maternity group, and sometimes they'll stay off. But when you get into that peak calving season, when they're just starting to drop calves everywhere, that's a good time to come because that's when you're seeing a lot of activity, and the calves that are a few weeks old are running and playing. And
you can't. I don't care who you are. You can't not be happy. You got something wrong in your soul if you look at bison calves and don't smile and laugh. They're just goofy and funny, but still agile and hyper focused on everything. And they're just it's remarkable watching them. They're fun to watch. So if you get a chance, go by the park this year. I don't know how things are going to be with COVID and stuff, but I think hopefully things are lifting up. And the beauty of Custer Park is you can drive through the park and don't have to get out of your car. You can drive through and hopefully if you're lucky, get a close up in your vehicle of the animals. They're close to some roadways and you can get pretty close to them. But I was over there with you and we had to drive around for, the three of us drove around for an hour trying. And it's just remarkable how you can hide 900 animals that weigh over 1,000 pounds. And you're like, where the heck are these things? And then all of a sudden, boom, you come over a hill and you're like, whoa, you spotted them way before we did, but they were a half a mile off and you're like, oh, there they are. They're up there. But then you come over a hill and there's 800 buffalo. They're just massive. I can't imagine what that was like back in the day, coming over the hill on a wagon or a horse and seeing a million of them in an open prairie somewhere in Kansas or Nebraska or the Dakotas or Wyoming. Just pretty remarkable. Yeah. But if you get a chance, I don't work for Custer Park, but I might as well be a volunteer or volunteer there because I will push that park. That was my first time being there, and it is a beautifully maintained park where there's gorgeous architecture and visitor centers, but you literally drive 30 seconds away and you feel like you're in the middle of the Black Hills or you're in the middle of nowhere. It's just a remarkable park, and I can't stress enough for all of you guys that are doing Yellowstone trips or coming out this way or on 90 driving from coast to coast or Midwest to West Coast, whatever it is, you take the time to detour and stop at the park. You might get a glimpse of Chad out there in his truck or on a horse, but stop at the park. Anything you guys want to talk about bison-wise? I've asked a lot of questions, but, the goal of this podcast is I really want to start having folks like you on regularly or monthly to just talk bison. I don't think enough information can be put out about these animals in the industry. So anything you guys want to talk about? John, I know you're...
Yeah, I got one thing for you.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm sure people out there listening right now, they're just like, oh man, bison are awesome. And maybe they're raising cattle right now. They're like, ooh, maybe we should think about switching or just adding in some bison. This is what we tell everybody. Join the National Bison Association and your local state and regional association. Wherever you are across the country, there's a state and regional association that's out there. And every bison rancher out there wants to help you succeed. They really do. And even if you're a trillionaire or a billionaire and you get into bison tomorrow, you're not going to be successful unless you have knowledge. So the National Association has tons of resources out there for people. Look up bisoncentral.com is their website. Join the association. There's tons of activity on Facebook for people to look at, and they'll get you in touch with a local rancher that'll help you out. You can come out to their ranch, ask them questions, start getting involved, going to conferences, just learning. Because the last thing anybody wants to happen is have somebody jump into the bison industry, start raising bison, and fail. We don't want that to happen. It's not good for you. It's not good for the animals. We don't want that to happen. So everybody's willing to help everybody out. So I promise you, if you take the time and you want to learn about bison, there is a person out there who's currently in the industry who will help you and will help you be a successful bison rancher, and it'll be worth it in the end. Putting a year or two of research into something before you jump into it, it's going to pay off. And so for those people out there listening, I strongly recommend doing that and, get into the bison. But raising bison's fun. Bison are awesome animals, and there's a spot for you.
There is, and part of that, one of the magic questions is always going to be whether you're a billionaire or somebody who's doing this with minimal resources. A lot of these auctions you can watch online, or you can watch the results. You can go to the National Bison Association and look at past, Judson, the guys that do this, and they're on social media, on Facebook groups, and the Facebook groups are very inviting. Yeah, you're always going to get a few wing nuts or people that, like drama, but it's very few and far between. It's a very, very helpful industry, but you can Google bison auctions, and there's not many of them. It's a tight-knit group of people who share that information with each other. It's not just about selling a commodity, because on the meat side of things and on the sales side of things, bison are a commodity as well as they are, the national mammal, and they're a beautiful species that is native to this part of the world. But you can watch those auctions and you can see what Chad was talking about the ebb and flow of prices of bison. And there's also some really neat stuff on there. Like, I don't know the exact number, but there's a dozen parks in this country, and there's, a dozen bison that, again, it's a commodity. So you're going to have interesting animals. And, every year the Turner Bison auctions off 3, 4, 5 Yellowstone bulls, which you can start to look at some of these animals in their history, the Caprock bison, the Wind Cave bison, the Custer bison. And it's fun to watch these auctions. And and when you go to these auctions, there are billionaires. There's somebody like me or John that haven't been doing this long. They're going to be sitting there with, a budget going, sweating, going, man, I want to buy one of those. But it's fun to watch is what I'm getting at. It's a neat dynamic. And if you're thinking about getting into this, to be able to purchase an animal, because they're going to be for sale, but to be able to purchase an animal from one of the national parks that's been around for 100 years, and these animals that have this incredible genetic lineage to the United States, specifically North America and the United States, it's fun to watch. Mm-hmm. But my point is, you can Google bison auctions, and that nobody's hiding that stuff. It's not a closed off industry. We want people, and I shouldn't say we because I'm brand new to it, but the bison industry wants people to have knowledge of those sales. It's not, it's one of those industries where nobody's going to try and screw you over, so to speak. But if you're interested, just Google bison auctions and you can see that data, or go to the National Bison Association, join, or at least watch their, look at the publications and the information they put out.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to say, great minds think alike, John. That's where I was going to go with this too. But join an association. And then...
And Chad, I'm going to interrupt you real quick. You're part of the Dakota Bison Association. What states and region? That's the Dakota region, but it's not just the Dakotas. It's
So I was going to mention a big regional one that I was involved with from the beginning, founding, and then was actively involved over the years as a board member. And also was show and sale committee. It was Dakota Territory Buffalo Association. That's based out of Rapid City. We'll go 22 years, I believe it is now, or going on. But get involved with the state and regional, and then get your toes in the water, get your feet, and then get involved. Get on the board, get on the committees. I was really involved with DTBA over the years. Been involved with the NBA currently. I'm the vice president of the National Bison Association for the last year here.
Because you don't have enough to do as it
yeah,
is.
but I've watched John here too, and I got to commend you for stepping up for that over the years. Watching you be involved down there with the show and sale at the GTSS, and then jumping in and the Rocky Mountain Association and the promotion that you do for that, because that is, over the years, even today, I hear of people that are out there raising them and they don't belong to any association. It's easier now today to find people that are raising them and ask advice and questions because of the social media. But you go back, 10 plus years, we didn't have that like it is today. And I mean, even in South Dakota there, I found out about people that were raising, 300, 400 head and never heard of them before. But they're out in the Badlands somewhere. They're running a lot of beef cows, and they just had, 300 or 400 head of bison run around too. And they're out there, they didn't do much with them. They had somebody they were selling them to at the end of the year, and they just didn't get that involved with the industry. And so I highly encourage people, and a question we get, and I've heard it a lot over the years, is, well, what do they do for me? Mm-hmm. And I've watched that transition over the past 30 years, like the National Bison Association. I've seen the industry change to where now we've had such growth. We're at a spot where we need that voice in Washington. And also our current executive director, Dave Carter, has been with us 20 years now, and watching him come in at the bottom when the market crashed into where we're at today with his knowledge and experience. I mean, he knows the contacts of, and he watches what's going on in the rest of agricultural industries and that. So it's valuable to support and collectively as a group, because everybody benefits from it. So, in the big picture, you look at spending $300 or $400 a year for a membership. Some people that's a
lot of money,
a good chunk of change to do that. But the value you'll get because of the association watching out for all things bison far exceeds it. I mean, that cost is pretty small when you look at the big picture. Look at the big picture of it. So I highly encourage, like John said, join. Start out at your state level. And the more people the more info you're looking, so you can get on the lists for newsletters and such, and grow your contacts that you have out there. So I really encourage people to get involved with the membership and then step up, because things are changing. We need new, younger people to come into those leadership positions, because it's changing all the time. So,
yeah, it's an incredible industry. And, one of my first introductions to it officially is, I'm driving in Texas. I was actually going to the WRCA World Championship rodeo, and I was driving through Texas, and I start seeing these signs for bison stuff, and then Goodnight, Texas, and Cecil Miskin. Man, it was one of those things where I saw this building and I'm driving by and I'm like, whoa. And then you see a few bison out, in front of this house/shop. And I'm so glad that I turned around. I was like, you know what? I got some time. I actually got in trouble with Buster because I stopped in Goodnight, Texas, and I was an hour late to the rodeo. And you don't ever want to be hour late to link up with, 15 working ranch cowboys. But I had stopped to talk to Cecil Miskin, who's been in the bison, been involved in bison for a long, long time. And you walk into this shop in Goodnight, Texas, and there's we don't have enough time to talk about Charles Goodnight and his wife and what they did for the bison as an animal and a species as a whole. But there's a small town called Goodnight, Texas. Google it, Goodnight, Texas, and Charles Goodnight. But I stopped in there, and it was like stepping back in time. I walked in, and Cecil was sitting there and immediately greeted me, and, 2 hours later of talking to him. He's got every bison artifact you could possibly want. Any good that comes off of a bison. When you talk about the magic word now in both the hunting community and livestock, it's harvest. When you talk about harvesting an animal, a bison is truly, if you look at the way Native Americans treated these animals both spiritually, and when you talk about harvesting them, they used every single inch and every single ounce of the animal went to use somehow. And I think people are getting back to that when they harvest an animal. If you go do a hunt with Chad in the park, you have the ability to process the meat, to take the mount, to, we have a mount behind us, but you can use every single inch of that animal. But Cecil, man, it was like stepping back in time. And since then, I've gone there a few times, and I visit with him, and they own, him and his son, they have buffalo companies that sell wool. And I'm going to plug that real quick, because the Buffalo Wool Company, I've started using bison products, and the wool is harder to get. When I say wool, like Chad was saying, it's more like a wool when you harvest buffalo hair. It's more like a wool, but I use socks now when I'm doing winter stuff and cold stuff. They don't smell. I'll wear them for 2 or 3 days and they don't smell. Same with, so if you're a fan of wearing wool stuff, check out Bison Wool. Check out the Buffalo Wool Company is a great company out of Texas. But I got sidetracked there. But meeting Cecil, you guys know him. Like, it was just literally the guy he didn't have to talk to me for 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it was. But, since then I've become pretty good friends with him, and what a remarkable guy. But just the knowledge that he has of the bison industry, and he's one of hundreds of guys and gals like that when you talk to him, that's one of the beauties of the bison industry is, people talk about things like equipment and, feeding and nutrition and this and that, but then I don't think I've met a bison rancher or bison manager yet that doesn't just have this glow of putting that animal on a pedestal, and it's remarkable.
That passion.
That passion for the animal. And it's just, we talk about meat and we talk about products and we talk about a commodity, but when it comes down to it, I'll say it again, 110 years ago, you're talking about having a couple thousand animals, and now you're at 550 and growing rapidly. But I really appreciate having you guys on. I could sit here and talk for 5 hours. I'd love to have you guys back on and keep coming on and keep talking about this, because the more, Chad, you've mentioned it here, Custer State Park manager of the herd. You have your own herd. You're the vice president of the MB. Like, just the amount of stuff, and there's a lot of people just like you in this industry. And I can text you anytime I want and say, hey, I got a question for you. And John the same way. John works. He's also a personal trainer at the gym that I go to. But if I have a question, I can call John, and I think that's the industry as a whole. So, if anybody catches anything from this show or takes anything away from this episode, and you have a glimmer in your eye of ever wanting to own bison, use the resources at hand. Please do. And don't be intimidated. If I can do this, I think John is probably quintessentially, as a business owner myself, John and Jen are doing this, whether you're going to sell chocolate bars or coffee, or you're going to start a bison ranch. The way they're doing their business plan is really fun to watch. Go watch JG Bison. John and his wife are absolutely smart about everything and starting a new business, not just a bison operation. It's fun to watch. You'll learn a lot.
Thank you.
There's one other option too I just thought of that's out there and has been over the years. I've kind of seen ebb and flow, but absentee ownership. 15, 20 years ago, that was a pretty big deal. And it was somewhat market driven, but if people are interested in owning animals, there are producers, ranchers out there that are willing to work a relationship out with people. If they want to buy 10 head, they charge them so much a year to run them on their ranch, and they can come out and visit whenever. It's an agreement between two parties to manage those animals for them.
I'm actually taking part in one of those operations right now.
Yep.
I'm doing that with a reputable. There'll be more on that to follow, but with a great couple that does that, and just where I'm at and everything going on, I'm investing some time and money into doing exactly what you just said. They're my animals. They're going to be on a lease. they're going to manage them. I'm going to pay them a certain fee a month to do that. And, it's a remarkable, and I think it's a pretty cool opportunity. I think there's a lot of people that would do that.
There is. I've visited over the years with several people, and, there's, I'm thinking of one, this probably at least 15 years ago, with the way the market was at the time. I had a gentleman from Ohio that was looking at getting interested in buying some animals, and I laid a plan out before him. And the one thing that I've seen over the years is people think, this would be great to do, and depending where the market is, especially on a high market, there is good money in it, but you have the highs, you have the lows, and he laid this plan out before him, and I remember his comment, it's like, well, there's not a, he was thinking it was a real big money making proposition. And when I laid it out to him, this is what you're going to buy this bison cow for, and I'm going to charge you this much to run it for a year for you, and you'll have a calf to sell at the end of the year for this much. He's like, I remember he just didn't quite grasp it. He's like, well, there's not a lot in it at that. And I'm like, no, that's the numbers. That's what it is. But at the end of, whatever the time period, 3, 4, 5 years, you own that cow free, and that's your factory. So that at that point, that's when you start seeing a greater return on it. So, it's not a deal typically where you jump in for a year or two and you're jumping back out.
No, and I think
a long-term
I think the
commitment.
media, the large scale media, because one of those companies was founded and owned by Ted Turner, people see that as like, oh man, you can make a lot of money. There's a reason Ted Turner has so many ranches and so many bison, because he's got $1 gazillion from all the other hard work he did in his life, and he's passionate about the animals. But there's not very many Ted Turners out there, and I don't think there ever will be. There's some billionaires that get into it, and they have the resources and the money that it's, they can afford to hit the lows and not worry about it. But as a whole, I think most bison ranchers it's a long-term project.
Yep.
And I realized that real fast, and that's why I've shifted gears. Everything I do at Bison Union, everything I do with Bison Union Coffee, every dime I have that I can spare is going to my long-term plan of eventually not doing this. Candace can take over, and I can go buy a ranch somewhere and be a bison rancher.
Yep.
But it's a 10-year plan. I've switched from a 5-year plan from a 2-year plan to a 5-year plan to a 10-year plan. So like Chad's saying, really look at that, because it's not a profitable.
Yep.
I mean, it can be profitable, but you're not going to get rich overnight with any livestock, specifically not bison. You're just not.
Yep. But it is an opportunity for folks if they ever have that desire, like you just said, 10-year plan. Well, I can build up a herd going down this avenue for when that day comes. I can purchase property and move them there.
Right.
So there are those opportunities out there, and join an association, making those
Yeah,
contacts.
and I'll put all this stuff out on the podcast, social media, and then I'll also post these guys and their families' Instagram stuff, and I'll post the National Bison Association, and then I'll specifically post Dakota Territories, but you guys, and I think on social media, I don't want to put you guys in front of the gun here, but if you guys have questions, I'm pretty sure, I know John will take them.
Anytime.
Chad, he message these guys on Instagram if you have questions, and if they can't answer a question for you, you guys will point people to the right resources. And myself as well. I am brand new at this. I know just enough to be dangerous and get myself into trouble, but I can also point you to other people like this, so don't be afraid to ask. I keep meeting a lot of people that are younger that want to get into this business, and they ask me, like, I've been in it for a while, and I'm like, hey, I am the wrong guy to ask. Let me point you in this direction. But my point is, I think there's a lot of people that are younger and fascinated by this. And then check on Facebook. There's a lot of bison, North American bison. There's a lot of bison groups on Facebook that you don't have to be a bison owner or rancher to be in, and they can ask. I think every day now somebody says, hey, I'm thinking about getting into this. And it's always the same dozen of people that answer those questions back, but there's resources out there.
Yep, there are. Just ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask the questions, because if you don't ask, you'll never know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for coming on, guys. I again, we'll keep doing this and keep pushing forward. And I don't think we can get enough information out about it. I obviously, man, I'm in love with these animals. And if you haven't been around bison, please, like if you're close to Custer Park, if you're close to Yellowstone, if you're close to some Cap Rock in Texas, people are like, well, I live in Texas and there's a hidden gem down there, Cap Rock State Park in Texas. You go down there and, get a chance to drive around and just spend. What I would recommend is don't just blow through the park. Like if you go to Custer, pull over and look at the animals and watch them for a while. Bison, if you watch them for a half an hour, you're going to see a lot of pretty unique things. They're fun to watch. You can't just drive through and see. It's not like going to the zoo and walking by a tiger cage. They're not going to be doing dynamic stuff all the time, but if you just sit and watch for a while, and I can't recommend that enough, you get a chance to be around them. Take some time to just get off your phone, to stop talking, and just sit and watch them. I think you'll be as impressed with these animals as I am and as these guys are. But thank you guys so much for coming on the program.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Really appreciating it. And for the three of us, and Carrick, who's back here, Carrick doesn't get enough credit for what he does for the podcast. We're a pretty small operation, and he does all of our editing and stuff. But for us here, say hi to your dogs and your bison. Have a good day. Be the bison. Or in JG Bison, be like bison. That's a good mantra to follow. These animals are humble, but they're also powerful and they're strong. So thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you guys soon.